Hey guys, in this tutorial I want to talk about the three different kinds of anchor point, get into the layers palette, as well as talking about how to generate a template layer so that we can take a resolution dependent image, bring it into Illustrator, and then using the pen tool, how to trace said image. I provided a file for you guys to download so you can follow along this tutorial. So let's get started. I'm going to go up to the top under the file and I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to call it pen tool sample. 8.5 by 11, it's fine. Portrait's fine. I don't need to change anything else. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the create button on the bottom. Okay, so there are three different kinds of anchor points. There's a corner point, a smooth point, and a cusp. I've demonstrated a couple of those in the previous tutorials, but let's just go ahead and recap real quick. A corner point is an anchor point that does not contain any kind of anchor handles. For example, if I just draw a rectangle on the board and then I grab my indirect selection tools, a rectangle, for example, is made up of 4 corner points. Again, it's an anchor point, which as you see here. These are tooltips that you mouse over these paths and it tells you that it's a path, and this is an anchor point. No matter how I shape this, it will always contain straight lines to its left and to its right. Doesn't matter the angles, as long as their lines are still remaining straight. Now, this little guy here, I can actually click on that and turn that corner to be a radius corner. And now I have a cusp, which is an anchor point that are independent of each other. So that's one way to convert a corner point to cusps. The second point that I want to get into is called a smooth point. A smooth point is kind of like a cusp, but it's an anchor point that contains anchor handles that are dependent of each other. So I just draw this elliptical by using the elliptical tool. I highlighted the anchor point with the direct selection tool. Then I get my anchor handles. Now this is the anchor. Now these anchor handles are dependent of each other. So no matter in which direction I move around my mouse, these anchor points are dependent of each other. So if I move this one left and right, it will affect the way the opposite side looks because they are dependent of each other. Unlike a cusp here that are independent. Let's draw that using the pen tool. A lot of the cusps are created using the pen tool. So if I click and drag with the mouse, I automatically generate a smooth point. But if I just click once without dragging, I generate a corner point. That here is a corner point. Again, if I click and drag out, that is a smooth point. Click and drag, smooth point. Now to create a cusp, I mouse over the existing anchor point that I just created and I hold down my shift key. Notice that once I mouse over, I get my convert shortcut tool that you see it showing on the left side of my icon. But I'm holding down the option key now and I generate a new anchor handle, automatically converting that anchor point to a cusp. Just keep drawing that way. Now, notice that the guide shows me what the potential path will look like, but I don't want to continue drawing. I want to deselect this, if you will. In order for me to deselect this path and to deactivate the path, I have to grab either the selection tool or the indirect selection tool and click somewhere on the page to deselect it. So now I can see what I drew. So this is a smooth point, even though it does not contain any additional paths, it's still considered an anchor point with dependent handles. This here is a corner point. Okay, this is also a corner point because it does not contain any anchor handles. This is another smooth point. And finally, I have a cusp. So if I grab this anchor handle, it will not affect the opposite side because they are independent of each other. Okay, this one is also a smooth point. And then I have another smooth point. They're the easiest to draw. Smooth points are the ones that you want to use when you're drawing any kind of arc or curvature because you'll have better control and have smoother lines as opposed to using it with a cusp. Because sometimes if you use a cusp to draw on a circle, it may look a little rough on some edges where the anchor point starts, and it's a little bit much more difficult to control when you're trying to create something smooth ends like that. Okay, so those are smooth points. Oh, just for some basic terminology, guys, this is known as the path, also known as a Bezier curve, and or line segments. You might hear me say either those three different kinds of definitions, but technically, all in all, it just means path, vector paths. So again, line segments, Bezier curves, or just plain paths. All means the same thing. All right. Now let's get into the layers palette here real quick. Kind of works like it does in Adobe Photoshop. Differences is we don't have like a corrections layers or mask layers, but we can create the layers into groups, add additional layers. You also have the drop-down systems here on the side that can create, to flatten your artwork, create a template layer to hide layers. So you have a lot of other panel options. You can click over here to the panel options dialog box. You can set your icon settings. I normally just leave all that in default. It's just how I've always worked. But get into custom to naming your layers, please. Like this one, I will probably just call it test, for example. But here, I can also change the color of my guides from the layers, so I can pick any kind of colors that I see fit. I normally go by default. Once it gets to a lighter color, like a yellow color, for example, I will always change it because it's just hard to see the guides against a white background. So I'm going to hit cancel for that real quick. Also, double click on that. You can name your layers. I call it test, and so on and so forth. Hit the return key to accept. I can add more layers, or I can create sub layers or subgroups for organizing my artwork in this fashion. All depends on how you wish to work with. It's really simple how to create layers. There's a chapter reading assignment in your schedule, so I would suggest and recommend that you follow along with that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is template layers, which is what's going to get me into demonstrating the pen tool even further. So the file that you guys have downloaded, if you don't have it, please go ahead and download that. I'm going to go ahead and place, it's a JPEG file, it's of a sailboat. I'm going to go to the File, Place. Now I want to talk a little bit more about this feature here. And I have mine in here under the pen tool sample. Here it is, the sailboat01.jpg. Now I want to link. If I don't link, it will automatically embed the image. There's two different kinds. There's a pros and cons to that. Linking versus embedding. If I link my file, I would have to provide it for the printing company so that they can access it. Otherwise, if you have a file linked and you don't supply it when you export your documents out for, I don't know, sending it off to print, when you open up that certain Illustrator document, it's going to give you an error message saying that you can't find this file, you need to replace it. Now, if you uncheck the links box, it's going to embed the image, and therefore you don't have to provide your files. Downsides to that is going to increase the file size of your Illustrator document, and in case you have to do any kind of like color corrections in Photoshop, you're a little bit SOL, because then the printing company is going to ask for the linked file anyways. So for this class, please, please, please always link, never embed. So we're going to link it. I'm going to hit place. Now you can click on the template and it will automatically place this file onto a template. But let's not just do that, because I want to demonstrate how you can do a template file manually. So I'm going to uncheck template. Select it, hit place. Now it can places it in two different formats. If I just click and let go, it'll place it at actual size. I'm going to delete that. So I'm going to go back to File, Place, select the sailboat again, link, place, or I can click and drag to the size that I want it on my page. And there we go. I want to center this, so I'm going to select that, grab my Align tool. Now in my Align tool palette, I'll tell it center align to the artboard, not the selection, but to my artboard, and I want it center it on my artboard. There. Hit OK. And now I can put that back, my Align tool. All right. So the reason why we create these into a template layer is so that when we draw any kind of artwork, we can view it in outline view mode and preview mode. So now that you see this artwork that is placed resolution dependent, if I go to my view menu and select outline view mode, which remember guys, outline view mode allows me to see my paths without the fills and the strokes. But if I do that, my image shows as an X. indicating that it is a resolution dependent file. View preview mode. Now, I'm going to show you why this is important. So that when you're drawing any kind of elements, you want to draw in outline view mode so that you can see the actual path without having any kind of distractions of any fills and strokes. That is the best way to draw. So in order to convert that so that I can view it in outline view mode, this has to be a template layer. So you go into your layers, double click on it. Instead of test, I'm going to call it template. Click on template to make that into a template. Now your dim setting image, if you leave it at 100%, it's going to show all of the black, which kind of makes it difficult to view in outline view mode. So I normally set the dim setting to 75% opacity of the original color of the image. So I'm going to hit OK to apply, and notice that my layer now is italicized. It has an embed, or it has a template icon instead of an eyeball, and it automatically locks my layer. So now I don't have to lock it. Notice that it's a locked layer. I have content, and I have this no pencil, meaning that I cannot edit it because it's locked. Now check this out, guys. I'm going to create a new layer, and this layer I'm going to call it boat. This is the layer that I'm going to redraw this artwork using the pen tool. Okay. So let's say that I just draw this rectangle here, for example. Excuse me, this circle, this elliptical cool. No fill, just a black stroke. And I'm going to enlarge the black stroke. This is just so that I can show you the difference between the layer files. Okay, kind of cool, it looks like a moon. But even so, if I go to the view menu, outline view mode, now I can see the sailboat because I have it set on a template layer. But I cannot see my colors of my circle that I just generated, which is nothing more than just a black stroke at 5 points thickness. Okay, view preview mode, now I can see my, my colors. Delete that. All right, now it's time to start drawing. So I'm going to grab my pen tool. Actually, I can toggle all these out here. I grab my zoom tool. I'm going to zoom in. Do not be afraid to zoom in. All right. So with the pen tool, remember, you want to start drawing in the direction that, like I do from left to right. So I'm going to start from the very top here. Now, once I start here, I need to plan ahead. So I'm looking at the boat. I need to plan ahead. Wherever I start, I gotta make sure that I come back full circle and close that path. So I click, zoom in again. So it looks like I can just create this entire silhouette all the way around, come back and close that path. Then I could come back in here and do the inside parts, the negative space here of the sails. So I'm gonna click on my pen tool. I'm gonna start over here. And I'm going to do this fairly quickly, guys, because otherwise this video will be getting a little bit too long, and I may not be able to upload it, and I have to splice it, and it's just fun. Now notice that when I start drawing, and I got a 5 points, even I can change this to a half a point, which should be okay, but I want to ideally draw in outline view mode, because now I can zoom in. Now I'm doing a Command plus, and I have only the vector paths to guide me. So that is why, and I'm holding down the space bar. The idea is to draw this with the least amount of anchor points as possible. Now it will take some practice. You're not going to get it all in the first shot. Okay? So with that part of the sail, now even if it's not perfect, I can always come back with the indirect selection tool and clean up my artwork. So let me deselect this real quick. Now for this path here, now remember, ideally you don't want to stop, you want to continue. You want to make sure that you draw this with the least amount of paths as possible. Like this one I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 anchor points. Okay, I'm going to delete this and I'm going to show you what I do not want to see. What I don't want to see you guys doing is click, 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 maybe drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag a little bit, kind of look straight, straight, and so on. This is what I don't want to see, guys, because even though it looks pretty sharp, all this nice cleanup, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 anchor points. When I can technically do that, I just deleted it. When I can technically do the whole thing with a lot less anchor points. So I can go from here to here instead of going, I can actually make this curve all the way down here. Click and drag out. Now it will take some practice for you to control these anchor handles. And I can holding down my space bar. So I did that area with this curve with only 2 anchor points as opposed to 13 or 14. All right, so I'm going to continue drawing this. Again, I'm doing this really sloppy and fast. I don't want this video to take too long. Here I can do this and draw this boat all the way across here. Coming back around, I do this curve. Now, since in this part here, let me grab my zoom tool. Grab my pen tool, reestablish connection. In this part here, since I'm going all the way across, I don't need this anchor handle, see? See, if I click here, it's going to create a curve. I don't want that. So I want to remove this anchor handle by mousing over the anchor point, click, and it removes the anchor handle. So now I can go back and create. So that automatically creates that curve into a cut, that anchor point into a cusp. Come back over here, click and drag. I don't need it again. I got this little picket here that I need to take care of. Remove that anchor handle. And now I can create my curves. Over here, if I hold down the shift key, I create a straight line. Come back up here. This is pretty much a straight line, so that's a corner point. This little guy, I can probably create it in this fashion. Actually, that doesn't look really good or natural, so I'll just create in that fashion that way. And now I have the part of the bottom of the sail. I can make that curve. Now I can zoom out, command negative, command minus, zoom out a little bit so I can see that sail. I can probably create my anchor point. Now, judging the distance, it just takes practice for you to understand how you can work and manipulate these curves. So now, and come back. Notice that I'm coming back full circle and close my path. I want this to have a black fill, no stroke. And if I go to view preview mode and zoom out, I can view my results. Notice that I need to now to create my negative space from the sailboat. But if I toggle command Y, by the way, is the keyboard shortcut for preview mode and outline view mode, command Y, I can see that I'm pretty close to my artwork. Oh, now let's do the negative space. I'm going to start with this part right there. I'm still inside the same layer boat. Grab my pen tool, and now I can start drawing the negative space of this part of the boat. Again, I'm doing this really fast. Ideally, I would want to spend a little bit much more time on this and getting these paths even cleaner. I am deleting anchor handles when I don't need them. And I can probably get away with this curve right here like that. I came back full circle. That path is now closed. That part is done. And now, finally, the negative space in this portion. And I can zoom. All this, I can do it on one line, one swoop, right there to create that pole, which I did. Oh, I missed. Edit, undo. Click and drag, create that line. And let's say that the anchor handle that you generate, let me zoom in on this, that you generated, you want that to be in a different angle. Hold down the option key and you get your convert tool. And you can direct that anchor handle, because depending on how the distance of this anchor handle is going to generate the path that you're going to draw next. Zoom out. I can click and drag out, create the path. Notice how this looks like it's curving too much, so I can hold down the option key, get my convert tool, and say, no, let's control that a little bit more over this way. And notice now that the path, the next path, the guide, it's closer to where I want it to be. Click and drag out. Now, it does take some time to get used to controlling all these paths. And I come back full circle, guys, and I close my path. All right. So I know that those paths are drawn. However, we have one less step to do. This is what you don't want to do. You don't want to select these paths and then just change them to a fill of white. right? I mean, it looks like it's complete, but ideally this is not the final end result, because let's say that I create a new layer on the bottom of that boat, and I'm going to call this water. Okay? And I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I want to draw a horizon line that would be the ocean or lake, and I want that to fill with blue. This is the results. This is what you don't want to see. Yeah, that's more like a blue color right there. Because otherwise, this will print, it will not print as a knockout. So what you need to do, I'm going to take that water layer and I'm going to lock it because I don't want to move it. I don't want to edit it. This is just a simple path. And what needs to happen is you need to like cut a hole in between these items, so that kind of like punching a hole, or do a divide. Or you can select all your paths that you've drawn, go up to the Objects menu, Compound Path, Make. And then you are done. You finished your sailboat. So next week's lecture, I'm going to get really deep into all the different kinds of shapes in Illustrator. So that tutorial is coming up. Just know that you can select it, go to the Objects menu, click on Compound Path, Make. And it solves that issue. But I will get into much more detail what exactly that means, guys. And there you go. That is how you use the pen tool.